This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping into a fascinating realm where ancient folklore basically meets monumental philosophy.
It's an amazing connection you've sent over.
It really is. You've given us a remarkable stack of sources that propose this foundational critique of GWF Hegel's systematic thought. And the whole thing can be summed up with an Aesop's fable.
It's incredible.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The core idea you highlighted is just so profound. Can the entire architecture of a philosophy that, dominated the 19th century, something as dense as Hegel, be perfectly represented by a simple story about birds?
And the answer, based on this material, is a resounding yes. It's a deep dive that shows this incredible structural parallel between Hegel's whole method.
The systematic dialectic.
Exactly, that and Aesop's the jackdaw and the peacocks. Once you see the map, it exposes this vulnerability right at the heart of the whole project.
So our mission today is clear. We're going to use your sources to trace this exact analogy. We're identifying Hegel as the crow decked out in borrowed feathers.
And we'll see exactly which feathers he borrowed and how he glued them on.
Then we get to the really good part. We're going to expose this delicious irony in how Hegel himself used the image of a crow to mock a rival, Friedrich Schelling.
Let's start with the fable itself. It's a simple story, sometimes called The Crow and the Peacocks.
Right.
So a crow, just a plain black crow, finds a pile of beautiful shed peacock feathers.
Okay.
And driven by vanity, he gathers them all up, sticks them on himself, and believes he can now declare himself the king of the birds.
But it doesn't work out so well for him.
No, the deception doesn't last. The real peacocks reject him, and when the disguise is stripped away, he's just ridiculed by his own flock.
That really sets the stage perfectly for the critique. So we're going to map that story onto Hegel's intellectual career using the points from the source material. We need the crow, the feathers, and the big reveal.
Precisely. Let's start with the foundation, what the critique calls the black crow.
Hegel himself.
Hegel himself, yes. His initial intellectual position were strong, no doubt, but it was limited in scope, compared to the system he ended up creating.
So what was his base?
His early work was rooted in theology, romantic speculation, some early religious criticism, and a really deep study of Christian dialectics and Greek philosophy. A great thinker, but his original plumage, so to speak, was modest.
So if that's the plain black crow, when does he start collecting the feathers?
Yeah.
How does he go from being this insightful thinker to the builder of an all-encompassing system?
That brings us right to the second structural point, gathering the feathers, or, as the sources call it, the plunder.
Plunder, that's a strong word.
It is, and it's intentional. The sources emphasize that Hegel didn't just engage with contemporary knowledge. He executed a systematic plunder and intellectual appropriation of basically every single academic discipline of his time.
You're kidding.
No, this wasn't just a footnote here or there. He systematically incorporated the entire range of human knowledge being generated. I mean, think about the scope here. He absorbed the mechanics of Newton, the chemistry of Lavoisier, the biology of Lamarck and Cuvier, emerging theories of psychology, all of Roman and common law, state theory, history, aesthetics, religion. He essentially swept the entire academic library onto his desk.
Wait, hold on. If he collected everything, how did he claim it was his own? How did he not just sound like, I don't know, an encyclopedia from 1807? Did he have some kind of philosophical glue?
That glue is the entire point.
Bro.
And it brings us to the third part of the analogy, claiming kingship and the empty framework.
Okay.
The sources are very meticulous here. He took all these disparate, borrowed feathers, and he rearranged them to fit the rigorous, preordained structure of his own philosophical machine.
The dialectic. The famous thesis, antithesis, synthesis engine?
That's the one. The critique argues that the dialectic was used as this powerful, supposedly self-validating framework. But if you take away the borrowed content, the actual findings of Newton or Cuvier, what are you left with?
An empty frame.
In the source's own words, an empty framework. An empty, vertical bookshelf. It's beautifully structured, but it needs to be filled by the achievements of other people.
I see. So the structure itself is the act of vanity. By fitting every known science into this framework, Hegel could then declare himself the ultimate synthesis,
The king of philosophy.
the steward of the absolute spirit.
Mm-hmm.
His system looked like the culmination of all human thought, but the vast majority of the actual stuff inside it was borrowed.
And that leads us to the crucial next phase of the fable, the moment the disguise is challenged.
The stripping of the feathers.
The analogy warns that any system built on pretense, on this kind of appropriation, is fragile. The question then is, who pulls the feathers off?
And I think I know the answer. Enter the great antagonist to the Hegelian system, Friedrich Nietzsche.
Nietzsche was definitely a major force, but it wasn't just him. The challenge came from anyone who just refused to accept the systemic necessity of Hegel's framework. But Nietzsche, he was special. He attacked the claims made by the feathers themselves.
Tell us more about that. How did he attack? What did he target that made the feathers fall off?
He went after what he called the illusion, the basic assumption that the system had any inherent truth beyond its own structural neatness.
Okay.
For example, Hegel claimed history was this rational, goal-directed process that just so happened to culminate in the Prussian state and, well, his own philosophy.
Right.
Nietzsche just laughed at this. He refuted this whole concept of the absolute spirit, arguing history was chaotic, driven by power, not some tidy reason.
So he wasn't arguing with the logic of the dialectic itself.
No, not really. When Nietzsche denounced the triumph of rationality, or the philosophical justification of the state, or the reinterpretation of Christianity as just an illusion, he was basically saying that beautiful shining feather you picked up, the one you call the purpose of history, it's fake.
So once those key feathers, like the ultimate direction of history, were challenged as illusions, the whole system just starts to wobble.
The beautiful academic display just peels away.
And what's left behind?
The intellectual equivalent of the plain black crow. The dialectical framework, as brilliant a tool as it might be, can't stand on its own. It needed the substance of law, chemistry, and history to give it a body.
Without those borrowed achievements.
The structure is revealed as an elegant, empty, vertical bookshelf. It looks imposing, but it holds very few original books on the shelves of, say, mechanics or biology.
That is a piercing critique. But now we have to pivot to the layer that makes this whole thing just brilliant. The supreme irony involving Hegel's contemporary, Friedrich Schelling.
Ah, yes. This is where the story gets deeply personal and wonderfully cynical. To establish his dominance, Hegel knew he had to publicly take down his intellectual rivals, and he chose Schelling for a very fierce, very critical dismissal.
And what was the insult he leveled at Schelling? What did he say?
Hegel derided Schelling's concept of the absolute. He claimed it was vague, shapeless, and ultimately you couldn't understand it.
So useless.
And he used this image, which became famous in philosophy, that Schelling's absolute was like the black crow flying in the darkness.
Wow. A devastating philosophical smear. He's saying it's all black, you can't see the edges, you can't grasp it, it's just dark.
Exactly. It implies Schelling's thought was obscure, that it lacked the rigorous, transparent structure that Hegel claimed for his own system. But this is where your insight from the source just perfectly reverses the mirror.
Go on.
The crow who was laughing at Schelling for being obscure was, ironically, the very same crow that was hiding his own vanity. His borrowed feathers in the darkness he was mocking.
Oh, that's incredible. So Hegel was doing his main intellectual appropriation, his feather collecting, while at the same time projecting the crime of obscurity onto his rival.
It's a masterclass in philosophical misdirection.
Double irony. It just solidifies the whole critique.
And it connects right back to the nature of the plunder itself.
Yeah.
How did he claim all these other disciplines? He didn't just list them, he philosophically consumed them. He declared that all these phenomena, mechanics, biology, art, the state, were merely external manifestations of the spirit unfolding itself.
So by doing that, he was basically asserting ownership over every scientific discovery his contemporaries made.
He transformed genuine scientific discovery into a necessary, predestined step in his philosophical journey.
His feathers.
Precisely. And if you look at the real originators of those feathers, they were scientists working empirically. Mechanics was post-Newtonian physics. Chemistry was driven by Lavoisier's experiments. Biology was developing through figures like Lamarck and Cuvier, who were focused on observation.
Not the unfolding of the absolute spirit.
Not at all.
And when you list them out like that, the appropriation just becomes undeniable. Hegel was a world-class philosophical editor, taking the real insights of specialists and framing them as proof of his own singular system.
And that contrast brings us back to Schelling one last time. Why did that insult land so hard? Because Schelling viewed nature and knowledge so differently. Schelling saw nature as forest.
A forest.
Dynamic, living, moving, constantly generating new forms. For Schelling, philosophy was about entering that living, shifting reality.
And Hegel looked at Schelling walking in this wild, generative forest and just dismissed him. He called his discoveries a crow in the dark.
But the sources conclude that, in reality, Hegel was in that exact same forest, quietly picking up every single discarded feather, the finished, static achievements of science, and gluing them to himself. He mistook his display of borrowed knowledge for the genuine substance of a philosophical swan.
This just perfectly summarizes the core conclusion of the material. The essence of this brand of systematic philosophy is that empty vertical bookshelf, a pre-designed framework meant to display borrowed knowledge so the owner can claim to be king of everything.
The entire argument, which spans history and metaphysics and logic, just gets boiled down to one perfect image. Hegel is a crow wearing the peacock feathers of science. It's a critique so clean you don't need any footnotes.
And we are left with that final, deeply satisfying irony. Hegel insulted Schelling as the crow in the darkness, accusing him of being obscure. But at the exact moment, Hegel himself was already the crow covered in other people's feathers, hiding where he got his plumage while mocking the man who was actually out there in the forest.
It's terrifyingly beautiful.
So what does this whole analysis mean for us today? The sources suggest that this entire critical structure, the jackdaw analogy, is functionally a perfect, concise, philosophical argument.
And that really leads to a final, provocative thought for you to consider.
Yeah.
The sources suggest this entire critique could be distilled into a short, elegant fable. Hegel and Schelling the crow in the dark forest,
Right.
which raises an important question. If the deepest, most severe systemic critiques of knowledge and power can be exposed entirely through allegories, through a simple story about birds, rather than through centuries of dense academic prose.
And what does that say about the true foundation and the ultimate vulnerability of any grand system of knowledge, philosophical or otherwise?
Maybe we should all be looking a little closer at the feathers in the framework.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.